We ready for this?
Yeah. Is it going to hurt? No.
This is Jim Daneker from Arcade Orchestra. Welcome to Legends and Legacies, featuring iconic artists who shaped the sound, the look, and the timeless impact of the 80s. These are the voices who defined a generation. We joined today's guest at his office on Music Row in Nashville, Tennessee. He's a current artist who's as much of an 80s fan as I am, so we thought it would be fun to chat about growing up in this iconic decade. Let's get into it with my good buddy, Jay DeMarcus of RASCAL FLATTS. Best known to me as Papaw on Instagram.
That's right,
which we'll get to, but perhaps better known to the rest of the world as a third of country supergroup RASCAL FLATS. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff, because this might be dated. 17 number ones, 23 million albums sold, 35 million downloads, 11 million concert tickets. Pretty sure that's changed over the last week. Over 12 billion lifetime streams, more than 40 trophies from the ACA, ACM, AMA, CMA. If I were in there, it'd be AARP. At this point, People's Choice and more. And just this last week, you guys started taking care of some unfinished business. The Life is a Highway tour just hit the road, celebrating 25 years of hits and the impact of one of country music's biggest groups. So first things first, thank you for taking the time
My pleasure.
to do this and chat about some fun stuff. So Jay, you and I are both close in age. You were born in 71?
Yes.
Okay, so 73 for me. So early 70s, both in an incredible decade and an even more incredible decade to come.
No doubt.
We both got some similar threads in our stories, which we'll get to, but give us the cliff notes of your story, especially what or who contributed to your story along the way. Lead us up to...
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate you coming by. And second of all, the numbers are close enough. Yes, they have changed a little bit.
I mean, you guys are, there's some potential here. I mean, you guys...
We're going to stay at it and see what happens. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and I was kind of, even though Ohio's my home and it always will be, my mom and my sister still live there, I was one of those kids that was a dreamer for sure, and I always felt out of place in Ohio. Couldn't wait to get to where music was being made so I could be around people like myself that had similar interests, similar drive to stop at nothing to make it in the music business somehow. I, of course, had no idea when I was a teenager what lay in store for me. But I knew I wanted out of Ohio. I knew I wanted to come to Nashville, LA, or New York, or wherever the doors would open to lead me to what I wanted to ultimately do. So I knew I wanted to be a songwriter or producer. My mom and dad were both musical. My mom was Country Music Queen of Ohio in 1969. Got a Decca Records recording contract. She opened for Loretta Lynn.
Oh, wow.
So in the end, my mom declined the recording contract to stay with my dad. They got married. My dad was a very gifted musician. He played guitar and piano and a little bit of everything. So I had a really great bass layer and a really great foundation growing up of musicality all around me. My grandparents played music too. Played in church. My Papaw was loved bluegrass, so he taught me how to play banjo and dobro and acoustic guitar. So had a really, really great upbringing in childhood. Was amazing because we had these Saturday nights where you would just sit around and you'd pick up whatever instrument was laying around and try to figure out how to play something.
That's awesome.
So that was kind of my childhood in a nutshell. I went to a youth program called Winterfest in Indianapolis, and I was 18 and I was going as a chaperone, which was weird because the
that's dangerous.
Kids I was chaperoning were only like a year or two younger than I was.
I did that too in youth group.
And I heard this group from Lee University called Danny Murray and New Harvest. And they were up there, and they were kind of like, if anybody follows Christian music, they were kind of like Lee University's version of Truth.
Yeah, sure.
So 8 singers, 4 musicians, and they recruited for the school.
Yeah.
So I went up and I spoke to them after their program was over, and I was just like, you guys sounded great. One of the kids, Javen Campbell, took an interest in me and said, where are you from? I said, I'm from Ohio. I will make a very long story short, but it was weird because he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm chaperoning some kids, but my mom's a music minister at my church and I play piano for her. And he called Danny Murray over, who was, teaching in the music program at Lee and also was the head of this ensemble. And Danny asked me if I was in school, and I said no. And he said, Javen told me you play piano. Our piano player just graduated, and the guy we have this weekend is filling in for us. And I was like, oh, that's great. Why are you telling me all this?
Yeah.
And he said, do you want to go to school? And I said, I've got no plans to go to school. I was broke, but I wanted to play music.
Yeah.
And he said, why don't you come tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock before the service starts? So he sat me down. He said, do you play by ear? And I said, yeah, my dad taught me how to do that when I was really young. And he started singing, praise and worship courses that I knew like the back of my hand.
Sure.
And I started following him. And he said, do you want to go to Lee? He said, here's the catch. We'll give you a full ride, but you have to recruit for the school. And that means your summers will be taken up by traveling with us.
Yeah. And
in a matter of 10 days, my life turned around. I sold everything I had in Ohio, moved to Cleveland, Tennessee, went to school for music, and my senior year there, I got a record deal with my roommate, Neil Coomer.
Okay.
And we ended up being East to West and spent 4.5 years in the CCM market.
Remember.
Had 6 number ones there, so I thought my life was settled, and as fate would have it, some things happened and life happened, and we ended up splitting up after 4.5 years, and kind of felt lost then and wasn't sure what I was going to do. And my dear friend Michael English took me on the road with him. I started playing bass with him and singing, and he let me produce my first record on a real label, which was the gospel record, which ended up being his biggest selling album.
Is that right?
Yeah. And we were dear friends and remain dear friends to this day. And in the meantime, my cousin Gary calls me from Columbus, Ohio, and says, man, I've been winning some karaoke contests up here. I think I got something, but I'd love to sing for you and come down there and spend a few days in Nashville with you. And of course, when I heard him sing, I was like, what are you doing in Ohio?
Right.
So he ended up moving and living on my couch. And about 9 months later, because of some other things that happened, I went to work for Shelley Wright and was her musical director. She wanted me to hire a new band, so Joe Don came in to audition. I hired him on the spot, just a tremendous talent, great guitar player, great first tenor singer, and introduced him to Gary, and we started working clubs around town.
Crazy.
And one thing led to another, and 9 months later, we were signed to Disney. Lyric Street.
Wow. So you...
Sorry for taking so much time.
No, that's what we're here for. So, doing my digging last night, researching a little bit. So you went through, the typical Nashville musician struggle. You went from, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, you had the thing with East West. I remember going to see you guys. Actually, I lived in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And there was a church called Calvary Temple. And it was this, early mega church back in those days. But I was so impressed because you guys opened with Kyrie.
Yeah.
And as a synth guy, I was so impressed because whoever was running front of house did a fantastic job.
That's killer.
It sounded great. So it was right up my alley. And
I love to hear that.
Yeah, man. That was a fun memory. That was right before I moved to Nashville. But so I was just reading, you had that period of struggle. So fill us in a little bit more about that. So you went from, you talked about Michael English, you had this deal, and then it did what it did. But you went through a bit of a struggle time. So how did you end up meeting Michael English?
I met Michael because we were both in CCM music, and we'd done some dates with him. And Mark Lowry was a dear friend of mine from the Gaither Vocal Band.
Mark.
One of the funniest human beings ever.
I ran front of house for him when I first moved to Nashville. Yeah, crazy stuff. But yeah, go ahead.
I bet that was an adventure.
It was an adventure.
So Michael and I met while I was still at Lee University.
Okay.
He came to sing for what we called Lee Day, where all the families come in and they can experience what the students go through, on any given day. Yeah. And I played piano on Bowed on My Knees while he sang it with the Lee choir.
Okay.
And I drove him back to the airport in Chattanooga, and we had a long conversation, and he was kind enough to give me some numbers of some publishing companies.
Okay, yeah.
And he was like, when you get to Nashville, if you ever end up there, stay in touch with me, and we can, I said, well, I want to come play keys for you is what I want to do. And he kind of
you put it out there, yeah.
He kind of laughed, and he was like, we'll see what happens when you get to town. He was so kind and so gracious for a young, naive college kid.
Yeah.
I was pretty bold back then, man, because I figured, what do you have to lose?
Right.
When you've got nothing, What do you have to lose? And so, sure enough, as fate would have it, I got to town because of that record deal, and we opened for Mark Lowry. Mark started taking to me to some of the Gaither Vocal Band shows and things like that. And I would play for Mark whenever East to West wasn't on the road. So we became really dear friends, and he said, I think you and Michael would be fantastic friends. And so we had dinner one night, and ever since that time, we became very, very dear friends. He was in my wedding. So he's still one of my best friends to this day, and he was also, I haven't even mentioned the fact, one of my favorite singers on the entire planet.
He's a monster singer.
There's nobody better. And the anointing on him is, in despite of whatever he went through and his own personal struggles, standing on stage next to him every night, the anointing that I felt and the lives that I saw moved and touched by him were immeasurable. And I loved being around that. It was good medicine for me in a really dark time in my own life. Because when East to West went away, I kind of thought like I'd blown my chance.
Right.
Like here it was, and now it's gone, and what am I going to do? Am I going to be a sideman for the rest of my life? It's not the most terrible thing in the world, but I had higher aspirations for myself. I wanted to be a songwriter and a producer, and you know, I loved all the things you did growing up. We've talked about this so many times. We have so many of the same influences, and I knew I always felt like God had something more for me, and I might have ruined the one chance that He gave me to do it.
We could talk about that all day long. I mean, you reminded me of something, though. I mean, being bold like that, and one of my funny little anecdotes. So I showed up. You remember the Creation Festival?
Oh, yeah.
You guys played it. 80,000 kids in like super rural Pennsylvania. It was the biggest Christian music festival, I think,
it was
in the world, if I'm not mistaken. And I showed up. This was, I think it was 1993. I showed up with a toolbox. I don't know what I was thinking. Full of resumes. Well, there was nothing on the resume. I was working at a music store in Pennsylvania, but do you remember Denny Keatsman, stage manager, tour manager?
Absolutely.
He saw aspiration in me, kind of same as you. Took me under his wing. He saw me changing guitar strings and drum heads and whatever. Well, my sights were set on, I want to work with this guy, Michael W. Smith. I grew up on his music, and as a keyboard synth guy, like, that was the goal for me. And I remember my parents, my dad, you know, he was a pastor. There wasn't money to send me to school, so they wanted me to go to college. So we came down here to Belmont for my senior year. I was basically punching the card for them. I don't want to do that. And but we came down, and I just remember being a kid in a candy store, like, this is where I'm going to end up. And the answer from my family was always, "Oh, God bless you. That's cute, but you need to have a backup plan." So anyway, I'm at Creation Festival. Smitty flies in with his band. This is when he had a Learjet, you know. I mean, it was his pop heyday, and so I took one of these resumes, you know, handed it to him, and it was the same. It was like, "Yeah, bro, we'll check it out." Well, being on the other side of it for 30 years, you know what that means.
Funny.
But 6 months after I moved to Nashville, I get the call, and it was like winning the lottery. You know,
that is so great.
Working with him, and there's a lot more to that story, but I love that, man. There's so many common threads.
Who knew you to call you to end up in that gig?
So you remember Brent Bourgeois?
Yeah,
he was Michael hired him to be the musical director for that tour. So I moved here May of '95, and that was my goal, was to work with him. I wanted to play, though, and this newfangled thing called Pro Tools had just come out. Nobody knew what it was, but I was so immersed in the gear side of things that they called me. Let's see, my first job was driving a truck around the country for DC Talk.
Oh, wow.
Denny hired me to do that.
Yeah.
So that came to an end. Then I got a call. Denny got me a gig with Mark Lowry, doing front of house for him for a month or two.
Wow.
So I was out doing that. I'm like, what have I done with my life? I'm 800 miles away from everybody I know. I really want to be working on the creative side. So Brent called me one Saturday. I'm home thinking, kind of like you, what am I doing with my life? This is not what I want to do. And the question was, what are you doing for the next year? You know, and I knew what he was getting at.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was, we need you to be in the band. And it was, no, we need somebody that knows all the technical stuff. Because his whole show back then was just monstrous. You know, 60-foot video wall and 9 keyboards on stage. And so my first job with him
was that Change Your World?
No, it was right after that.
Okay.
I'll Lead You Home.
Yeah.
So they needed somebody to build this monstrous keyboard and Pro Tools rig that ran the whole show. And so I'm 22 years old. It still blows my mind that they trusted me with that, you know. And,
yeah.
But the funny thing was, he was still so busy with his pop stuff. He was never at sound check because he was always doing interviews. So I became the fifth Beatle. My voice, I could make sound pretty much exactly like his, so they would have me play and sing his parts.
Yeah.
And so as soon as Brent left, I called Michael, that following January. I was like, look, give me a shot. Let me be in the band. I'll design the rig so I can run it. And I'm appealing to the bean counters, like that's 2 jobs for the price of one. And
Sure.
like, yeah, we'll try it. And then 27 years later.
That's killer, man.
It was, yeah.
Yeah,
Crazy.
The Big Picture Live tour on VHS changed my life.
Oh, bro, me too.
That's when I knew I was hooked.
Yeah.
And Chris Rodriguez and David Huff.
Yeah.
All of those guys. Wayne. What a show.
Yeah.
And I wore that tape out.
So did I.
I was like, this is what I've got to do.
Yeah.
There's nothing in me that will ever stop me from trying to be there.
Yeah.
So Smitty's music in his career was very influential on me as well.
Yeah.
And being in a band with Chris Rodriguez now is weird because I watch those videos with him and I'm like, so right here, like, what were you doing? And what?
Right.
It's like,
what a guy he is too.
Oh, he's great.
So generous. Chris, for those of you who don't know, is a monster guitar player. He's played Keith Urban, Kenny Loggins, Generation Radio, which we'll get to.
Really everybody. Megadeth.
He played. Golly, I forgot about that.
Yeah. Faith Hill.
Yeah.
Keith Urban.
Massive session guitar player.
And a great singer, too.
Fantastic singer.
So Glenn Pierce was in the band when you were there, too. He's another dear friend of mine.
Yeah.
We were fast friends when he first moved to town from L.A.
We call Glenn Stealth because, you know that you're walking through an airport with him and all of a sudden he's gone.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes later, he shows back up with a Starbucks in hand. What a good guy.
I loved his band he was in called Liaison. Remember them in the late 80s?
I don't know if I've ever heard of that one.
Yeah, they were killer.
Glenn is, he's just one of those guys, he's so quiet.
I know.
But when he gets a guitar on, it's like...
He did some Michael English shows.
That's right. I remember hearing about that.
It was so much fun.
We did, with Smitty, we did a week of recording at Skywalker Ranch. So growing up a synth guy in the 80s and Star Wars. It was like our mecca. We were constantly like, is George Lucas here? They were working on, this would have been 2003. So they were working on, I think, one of the last of the prequels.
Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith, yeah. But Glenn was in the band then. And I just remember one of my takeaways from that, aside from all the Star Wars paraphernalia everywhere, was Glenn, his guitar stuff. Yeah. And his stealth persona. He would go jogging every morning. So he comes in one day and he said, you guys aren't going to believe this. I was just jogging by this barn. And so I walked in. I'm like, what's this? Guarding the barn was a stormtrooper, mannequin.
That's amazing.
And he said it was like that scene in the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark where it just goes on and on and on. He said, but there's this thing under a tarp. So I yanked the tarp off. It was Luke's land speeder from Star Wars.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just, that was the beginning of the stuff. And he said, and then 5 minutes later, this security guard comes in and he goes, how did you get in here? And Glenn, he's like, the door was open. I just walked in. And this guy said, I've worked here for 10 years. I've never been in here. So we need to get out. But if you don't tell anybody, I won't tell anybody.
That is amazing.
Typical Glenn story. He's just one of those guys. So, so you touched on Generation Radio. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And the aspect of you've got heroes on stage that you grew up listening to.
I mean, imagine, gosh, the best way I can describe it, I was thinking about this the other day. Imagine you grow up a super fan of the Dallas Cowboys when you're a kid. Mm-hmm. And you're watching these guys on television. They're going to Super Bowls. They're winning Super Bowls. And you love Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith. And you're like, oh, man, if I could only play for the Dallas Cowboys one day, wouldn't it be incredible? Yep. That's what it's like being in Generation Radio. I hate to say this in front of them because they always give me crap about me making them feel old, but I grow up with these guys as my literal heroes,
sure.
Jason Scheff from Chicago and Steve Ferroni from, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And before that, Dean Castronovo from Journey and Bad English. And Chris Rodriguez, another hero of mine, sang on our East to West records, So he just, there are guys that I revered and really held in such high regard and shot to be like them with everything that I did, you know. And to wake up one day and be able to call them friends and bandmates, it's pretty surreal, you know, because I always, every time I'm on stage, I feel like I'm the least qualified one to be up there.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful place to be in, too, because it pushes you to be better than you think you're capable of. So I love it, but I look around and I go, man, I'm the one that sucks up here. This is
no, but yes, I get what you're saying.
So it's been incredible. That band started out of sheer boredom because COVID hit. And I always wanted to find a way to make music with Jason, who's another one of my best friends and was also in my wedding. So it's a lifelong friendship there. And I called up some guys and I said, I don't know how you feel about this whole social distancing thing, but if you feel safe in my house, I promise, you know, we'll
sanitize everything.
Yeah, you know, it was such a crazy time. And everybody was like, I'm tired of being home and locked up. So we camped out at my house for a couple of weeks and started recording some older songs that I'd written that were just kind of laying around, and we had a whole lot of fun. Yeah. And it was so easy, and we were all like-minded in our tastes and our musical influences. And I mean, you know, when you hear Jason's voice, you can't help but go to where he lives musically, you know? So it was just a no-brainer for us to... And I'm so proud of that record. You know, it was so much fun to do. And when then we started doing shows, the Flats, it kind of retired for the time being.
Because you guys, correct me if I'm wrong here too, the Flats were about to do a farewell tour, right?
Yeah.
March 2020. Mm-hmm. I think every one of us has a nutty story. We were about to start a tour. We did one show.
We did two.
March 13th, which was my birthday.
We did.
And then the next morning, it was like, we're somewhere else in Texas, and it was like, guys, just hang in your hotel rooms. We don't know if there's going to be a show tonight. By 1 o'clock, we're on buses coming home.
Yeah, I get it.
Probably the same for you guys.
Totally. We did one show in Falls View Casino in upstate New York, and we canceled our meet and greet. Every time we changed guitars, they would wipe them down and they would sanitize the mics and hand them back to us. And I mean, it was overkill, you know? And they were like, as soon as you get off the stage, we got a police escort. We're headed straight out of town because we got to get back home. Yeah. And they thought they were going to shut down borders and shut down. I mean, it was crazy.
I found myself in Guam with Smitty. It was February, so about a month before that. And my flight home, he went on to do something else. I had to come home by myself through Seoul, South Korea.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sitting in my hotel room watching CNN, like, am I going to be able to get home?
Mm-hmm. I know.
And the president of South Korea was saying, we're going to shut down the airport. I think it was the last flight out. And I mean, it was like that scene in Return of the Jedi, the Millennium Falcon getting out of the Death Star as it's blowing up. What a crazy time.
Bump on the roof.
Yeah, seriously. So you guys, same thing. And you never got to do a farewell tour.
We never did. And you know what? And in a lot of ways, I look back now and it was kind of a blessing because we didn't have to say goodbye. Yeah. And who knows what the future holds, but we're having fun right now. It's been a really, really great thing to be back. I think we appreciate it a little more now.
It's been 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's been a wonderful thing to feel, at least the first weekend, the love from the fans and the welcoming back with open arms. It's been really cool.
Now, is it considered a farewell tour? I mean, I know you're calling it Life as a Highway. It's
just calling it Life as a Highway. Okay. We may do some more shows. We're going to wait and see how this first run feels and then revisit. But I think everybody has really loved being back together. And it's been great. You know, I hadn't seen Gary in a long time.
Is that right? Yeah.
He lives much further south of town on a farm that he has, so he rarely makes it in, so our paths just don't cross. Yeah. So it's been really great to be back with my cousin and kind of feel that energy again.
Yeah. That's awesome. Hey, I hope you're enjoying today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. We just want to give a quick shout out to our friends at ADK Microphones. I've used all kinds of mics throughout my career, and I can honestly say I've finally stopped searching for that holy grail studio microphone. I've been using their custom shop Z-Mod series to record some world-class guest artists for Arcade Orchestra, and their TFET series is top-notch as well and super affordable. So be sure to check out ADK Mics at adkmic.com. Now back to Legends and Legacies. Okay, so in 2006, you got the call that many of us 80s keyboard players would dream of to produce a record for Chicago. those shoes were occupied by David Foster.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So how did you navigate being a huge fan of them growing up? And Jason and I have talked about this. There's kind of two different Chicagos. There's the 60s, 70s Chicago, then there's the 80s Chicago. I mean, how do you navigate coming from the fan side and then now having to both earn their respect?
Yeah.
Because you're young, you were younger than they are, and also crack the whip and be captain of that ship. I mean, that's kind of a delicate balancing act.
It was a delicate dance for sure. And it was very overwhelming. And I kind of felt like I had been thrown in the deep end of the pool.
Sure.
Immediately. So it was born through mine and Jason's friendship. We'd been writing together, co-writing. And our demos sounded like Chicago records.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a natural thing, I think, for them to listen to the demos and go, you're writing some good stuff. We haven't been in the studio in 12 years. I actually called David Foster and said, man, I think I might have a shot at this. What's your advice? And he was like, don't do what I did. Don't split the band up.
Well, yeah, right.
We kind of had a big laugh about it. And he said, you got this, man. It's been a long time since I was there. And I said, well, do you have any advice for me? He was like, just cut great songs. Make sure
there you go.
At the end of the day, you cut great songs.
Yeah.
And so we found some songs. We found some songs here from some Nashville songwriters. Actually brought Robert Lamb and Bill Champlin in to co-write with some of the bigger songwriters at the time here in Nashville.
Great.
I wrote some and contributed to the record, which was certainly an honor and a blast. But it was tricky because I felt like what they were asking of me was almost impossible. Honor the old Chicago while taking them into a new era, but still nodding to the 80s.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's three different platforms, so to speak.
Whole lot. So it was a daunting task, but one that I'm forever grateful for. It is some of my favorite memories of making music.
Yeah.
Hearing their stories about the old days and the 80s and all of the things that they lived through and experienced, and being able to sit at dinners with them and just soak it all up was amazing. Bill Champlin is still a dear friend, and I stay in touch with him. And of course, I'm in the band with Jason, and he's one of my dear friends. But I got to know Jimmy Pankow so well, and Walt and Lee, and just to be in the room with those guys, experiencing that was really fun. It was tough. There were some moments that were contentious because I think when the horn players started laying down their horns, Jimmy's very proud of his arrangements and is a total muso and knows so much about arrangement and sound and music. And, when we first started the first day, they hadn't been in the studio together recording in over a decade.
Oh my gosh.
So they weren't playing in tune.
Yeah.
And I knew it, and I was kind of sitting there at the console, and I'm like, I've got to say something. We're through the fourth pass of this song, and it's not in tune yet.
Yep.
And so...
And that's back still when studio time was...
at a premium.
Yeah.
For sure. And I'm out in L.A., I'm staying there for the week to do horns.
Yeah. Yep.
And I said, hey, guys... I'm sorry to tell you this, but we're still not in tune. I don't know what's happening, but there's a discrepancy between what the bone is playing and the saxophone.
Yeah.
And Pankow took his headset off and threw it down on the music stand. He goes, I'm coming in. And I'm like, this is the day I get fired, right? And he stands behind me. He goes, let me hear it on playback, and this time turn it up. Make sure you can hear the horns loud. And then I got Pankow over here.
Yeah.
And Walt Parazators on this side of me, and they're both just hovering.
Yeah.
And they're listening, and I've got my head down. I'm like, this is it. They're gonna fly Jeff Balding and I both back home tonight on the red eye.
Oh dear.
And so I'm listening. I got my head down, and I lift my head up after the song is done, and I look up at him, and he goes, the fucking kid's right. It's not in tune. We got to go do it again. Sorry about this language.
No, man.
That's verbatim.
It's hey, we're here about accuracy.
And so I think I earned their trust.
That'll do it.
And they never said another word. If I wanted them to replay a section, or I was like, we got to get that tighter.
Yeah.
To their credit, I'm a young kid.
Sure.
What do they don't owe me anything.
Right.
But it was really great to feel like I had done something to prove myself.
Absolutely.
To where they knew they were going to be in good hands, and I was going to honor them and get the best I could out of them. So it was smooth sailing from them. That's great. And it was
It's almost like you have to have a moment like that.
You do.
You know,
you do a little bit.
For you to be able to prove that you know what you're doing. But that's a scary moment.
It's very scary.
I've had many of those.
Very scary. And I'm like, I know that I'm right, but I don't want to be like that guy that loses the gig over challenging the Chicago horn section.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, so it was great. My dad, who was a huge Chicago fan, got to sit in on some of the sessions, and he's now passed. And I created wonderful memories with him being a fly on the wall. And Dad introduced me to the old Chicago. When I heard Hard to Say I'm Sorry, I thought it was a new band. It changed my life.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I took it home and I was like, Dad, you got to hear this new band, Chicago. And he started laughing. He was like, new band?
Yeah, you talk about a band with a legacy. Good night. I mean, they really do have like at least 3 separate eras.
It's amazing. And they're still going strong.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that I'll forever be grateful for. It was really hard to get that record done because we were in the middle of probably, some would argue, the peak of the Flats career.
Yeah.
With the Me and My Gang record coming out. But I have to say, in the same breath, Dann Huff was a tremendous help to me because, you know, when I would get stuck and not know how to navigate the tricky waters of, you know, bands that have been together a long time, tricky egos. I mean, it's tough. So I would call him and I'd say, what about this? And he would go, all right, here's what you do. And here's who you call. And then he also came in and played a bunch of guitars for me for nothing.
Oh my gosh.
So he was just, he was a real friend and a real mentor.
It's good you could give him a shot.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to, you know, he'd been struggling.
Right.
So I wanted to.
If you don't know who Dann Huff is, look him up.
He's just, Dan's another one of those guys that it's been so good to me and so, and championed me so much and without any reason to.
Yeah.
You know?
I think all those, I mean, I've always said, having been able to work with Smitty and Amy Grant for, you know, the better part of 3 decades, I've always said those people are where they are for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, because I've seen them do things for people that nobody else would see, you know. And Dan, same kind of guy, just big hearted. And, that's awesome. Man, we're making good time here.
Well, I'm a great interviewer.
Well, I mean, that's a given. Is there?
There's your outtake right there.
I mean, seriously,
there's your tease.
We need some of those. I know the answer to this, I'm sure, but I'd like to hear your version of it. Is there any cross-pollination between all of your 80s influences and what you've brought to the table with Rascal Flatts or other projects you've introduced?
100%.
Yeah.
Unequivocally so. It's, Dan and I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
We've tried to sneak all of the stuff we did in the 80s into country music.
Yeah.
And it seems to work.
Yeah.
I mean, when you do it the right way and you have the right balance and the right combination, it just, I mean, we wanted to be country's version of Journey. I mean, we wanted those soaring guitar solos with those melodies that felt like they could be sung in arenas. I mean, that's what we wanted. Big drum sounds, big harmonies stacked. I mean, it just, everything I love about the 80s, I think we were able to take some hybrid of that and bring it over here. Obviously, if it were up to me, we would have more synths.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, you and I could talk about that for a long time, too.
Well, you know, we went through a phase there that was troubling for people like you and I. You know, I'm like, I would stand and look at my keyboards and they're just collecting dust. And I'm like, what's going on here?
You meander out front and their faders are down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And now, thankfully, I feel like it's come full circle and we're back. But you know, country music has been slow to embrace. If you're too synthy, if you have an ARP or something going on, they kind of like, what's happening here,
son?
Yeah, hey boy, that ain't no Wurlitzer. You have to turn that down.
Yes. All right, some fun stuff. These are mandatory, obviously, with Arcade Orchestra. You know, we'll talk about that. 80s questions. First thing that comes to mind, rapid fire if you want. What's your favorite 80s movie?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, that's an impossible question to answer.
It is.
I'm going to go really cheesy on you.
Okay.
Can't Buy Me Love.
Ooh, all right. Why?
There was something about Amanda Peterson that I loved. She just was adorable in that film. You know, sadly she's dead now.
Yeah.
But
okay, all right.
And, what's his name was pretty good too.
Yeah, gosh,
McDreamy.
Yeah.
What's his name? I can't believe I can't.
This is what happens when we're in our 50s. I can't remember why I walked into a room half the time.
I know.
Favorite soundtrack of the 80s, or one of the, that's another one that's hard to answer.
Favorite soundtrack? Oh, that's got to be Rocky IV.
Yeah, okay. We were talking about that the other day. What was the name of the guy who scored that? Not a big or a common name to a lot of people when you think of film soundtracks. I think it's an Italian.
DiCarlo. Vince.
I think it's
DiCola.
That's
Vince
it.
DiCola.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. You remember? I was gonna say favorite 80s candy. You remember all the crazy candy that existed back then?
I do, but it's got to be Payday for me.
Payday?
Yeah.
All right. I think mine is still good old classic Reese's Peanut Butter Cup.
Yeah, and peanut M&Ms are hard to beat.
There were so many 80s ones that they came and went.
Remember Zagnut?
Yes.
With the white chocolate on the top of the...
Yep.
Those were good too.
With AO, one of the things we want to do, we want to build an 80s mall for the merch area. We want to have a candy store that brings back all these old
That's
candy.
so great.
So, we're going to be sponsored by the American Dental Association. You met breakfast cereals? Remember those? You'd get a prize, like a...
Yeah. My Honey Nut Cheerios.
Nothing like no Fruity Pebbles?
Didn't like the sweet stuff. It
Really?
was like, if the milk was too sugary, it made me kind of sick.
So, I'd have to go with Apple Jacks. I mean, it would tear up the roof of your mouth.
Yeah.
You'd have
Frosted Flakes? Can I change my answer?
Right.
How about that?
I remember, what was it about the 80s? We'd go, they had cereal like that was, I forget what it was called, but donuts. It was basically like frosted donuts. My mom would get annoyed with me because I would yank the bag out because there'd always be a prize in the bottom. So that was always my thing. But
Footloose is a great soundtrack too. See, now I'm
which
going
one?
back. Footloose.
Footloose. Oh
I'm going back through all of these things that would be great answers.
Yeah. There's a ton of them.
Yeah.
All right, these you can put some more thought into. Top 3 80s artists or bands.
Gosh, well, Chicago's at the top. Toto.
Yeah.
Let me pick mine. You must choose your last answer wisely. I gotta go with Mr. Mister.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and I would say Genesis, but they're not really an '80s band. They started out in the '70s.
Yeah.
So I excluded
Another
them.
one that has probably 2 different eras. There's 70s Genesis and 80s Genesis. Top 3 songs?
Man,
It's
a tough one. Don't Stop Believing has to be in there.
Yeah. You guys do that one with Generation Radio, I'm assuming?
We did. And Dean left the band, so now we've tried to minimize our journey. Inclusions. So Don't Stop Believing. I'd absolutely have to go with Hard Habit to Break. And then number 3. What would number 3 be? We're talking 80s pop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have to go with man, there's so many great ones to choose. I Can't Fight This Feeling. R.A.O. Speedwagon.
All right.
I've always been a ballad guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that song, I remember where I was when I heard that song, and I was like,
yeah.
And he told me that it took him 10 years to write that lyric.
Oh my gosh.
What are your top 3?
So I'm probably one of the biggest Phil Collins fans on the planet. And top of my probably top 2 are In the Air Tonight and Take Me Home. Take Me Home to me, like, you and I both grew up in the church, CCM, all that kind of stuff. I feel like so many of these songs, at least the ones that we're working on with Arcade Orchestra, they've got a spiritual component.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny, if you listen to a lot, or if you kind of scope the lyrics of a lot of these 80s songs, especially the Genesis stuff, like Turn Me On Again, or Turn Me On Again. Some of these, they don't make any sense, but they sound great with the melodies. But Take Me Home, that one to me, that's borderline, that's a worship song.
Yeah.
Like it, or In the Air, not In the Air, In Your Eyes, Peter Gabriel.
Oh, yeah.
There's just, there's just so much depth to those. Like, I have a hard time with a lot of, like modern worship music. To me, a lot of it sounds like it was just written for CCLI money.
Sure. Because it was.
It was, because it was. But I don't know. I just feel like when I go back and listen to some of those songs, The Living Years, Mike and the Mechanics, I mean, I can't get through that without sobbing. Especially that last verse,
Now That My Dad's Gone Too, man.
Yes, right?
I'm telling you.
Same here. So it's hard to say top 3, but
It is really tough. Gosh, I didn't even think about that song. That would be. I recut that on Michael English.
Did
too.
you?
Yeah.
It's classic.
Oh my gosh, it's such a great one. And then I'm forgetting all about Tears for Fears too. That was another one of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
I mean, good grief.
Yeah.
All of me. It's really tough to narrow down, like, because there are also certain seasons that I was into different things growing up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like some of it was synth pop, but some of it was like arena rock. Then I go to Def Leppard, and I'm like, wow, Love Bites was a great record.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I'm just all over the place.
Dude, so same here. So I used to, being a pastor's kid, I remember 1985 when Shout dropped.
Oh yeah.
You know, that song, it has, I don't know if dark is the right word, but it was brooding and very different. And I just remember on a pure sonic level thinking, am I allowed to listen to this? So I would go down the basement with my boombox and kind of listen kind of quietly and jam out to it. And
Me
like,
too.
You know, and
my mom screened all my records.
Did she?
So I'd go down in the basement, and I would listen to it first before she would get home. And I'd be like, she's either going to like this, or she's going to toss it.
Right.
So, like, a Kiss record or an ACD record,
right?
You know, she was one of those. I grew up Pentecostal,
So
she was like,
so you were not higher than I was.
Kiss stands for Knights in Satan's Service, and you'll not bring that filth into my house. You know, like, and now I wish I could say, you know, Mom, I met Gene and Paul, and they're really kind of good dudes.
Right.
I don't think they were pushing the whole.
It's so funny how that stuff changes because, you know, back then I was the only one in my family who was really musical. So, so much of that stuff I was almost afraid to listen to it. Now I'm like, man, by today's standards, this stuff is
tame,
innocent as the day is long. But so Jason, Chef, he came over. We started recutting Will You Still Love Me? It's almost 2 years ago now. And it was mind-blowing to me on two levels. 15-year-old me was sitting there freaking out because he's standing over there singing that song in the same key, which is up there.
Oh, yeah.
Then, you know, 50-year-old me is freaking out because on the technical side, like, he's pulling all these crazy harmony parts out of his memory. Of course, he's still singing it. But I got my heart broke at 15 at a junior high dance or whatever it was to that song. And then here we are doing that. And just so many levels. What an amazing guy. He's such a tender-hearted guy. We ended up standing in my kitchen for 4 hours and just talking about life. But what an education on a musical level. He was teaching me. I thought I had it figured out how they cut vocals on those records. No.
It's a clinic.
It is a clinic. And what an invaluable lesson in that stuff. David Foster stories. And but another one I've just been working on lately is I Want to Know What Love Is by Foreigner.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and of course we've all heard it. Yeah, we've heard it a million times, but kind of getting inside that song and then reading some of the stories behind that. There's, you know, I took, when I started Arcade Orchestra, the kind of the behind the scenes work, one of the first things I did is I went through all the Billboard charts of the entire decade. And it quickly became evident, how in the world do you boil down that decade of timeless songs? There's hundreds of songs that are, I mean, all a clinic in how to write a great song.
It's unbelievable. And Loverboy.
Yeah.
I mean, did you hear the solo record that Peter Wolf did on
it's at one point here. There. No, I didn't.
Even if heaven and earth collide.
Oh, yeah.
Peter Wolf was another one of my favorite producers of that decade. Not the Jay Giles Peter Wolf, but the one from Austria. Yeah. And he did, he co-produced our second East to West record with Bill Baumgart.
Awesome.
And he made great records too. Wang Chung.
Yeah.
King of Wishful Thinking for the Pretty Woman soundtrack. I mean,
that was a great song. Yeah, it's just endless.
Remember Go West?
Absolutely.
He did those records.
Okay.
I mean, just
those were great sounding records. Like they had a really polished sheen to them, and that's for me. That's another thing I just love. I'm a big ear candy guy, of course, a synth guy, but you go back and listen to that stuff, and it's just masterful how those mixes were done.
It is, and to think about how they had to program the sounds back in those days, and sequence. I mean, now it's easy. Any kid can pull up Logic and push a button, and you've got an ARP, and you've got pretty decent sounds. But these guys were in the guts of these machines programming these sounds.
Yeah, and it was very simple
on these records.
You needed, Lindrum, an AMS reverb, you know, the nonlinear preset, DX7, and couple of things, but
A wall of DX7s.
a wall of DX7s. Yeah. So
They sound pretty crappy on them.
they do by themselves. And I remember when I finally got one, when they were already out of fashion, I think it was in 1989. I'm like, this thing sounds like crap.
Yeah.
It's noisy and, and fizzy, but when you stack 8 of them,
It's amazing.
and you run them through,
Heaven.
a Dimension D chorus and a little bit of that AMS reverb, it's a whole different ball of wax. Hey, thanks for listening. In case you're wondering, what's Arcade Orchestra? Well, what if you could go back and actually relive the 80s? Not just listen to the music, but actually travel back in time and experience the best of the decade in a fully immersive experience that engages all 5 senses. We are building this experience, and it's called Arcade Orchestra. If you'd like to know more, be sure to follow us on our socials, YouTube channel, and arcadeorchestra.com. Now back to Legends and Legacies. The biggest touring acts of the last few years, Genesis, going back to 2022, did their farewell thing. Journey and Toto are out filling stadiums.
Yep.
Def Leppard, Tears for Fears. Why do you think 80s nostalgia in particular is so powerful? Why do you think it, especially 80s music, but even the movies? I mean, what?
I think the people that grew up on that music are our age now.
Yeah.
And there's something that they miss about the innocence of that time.
Yeah.
I think it takes you back to a place in time where life was good. You're living as a teenager carefree. You don't have bills. You don't have a family to take care of. And I think people want an escape just for a little moment in time to be able to remember how great it was to live in that era.
Right.
And it really was.
It was.
When there's something, when I'm scrolling through my feed on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and I see one of those reels that say like, remember this?
Yeah.
And it goes through like a montage of kids walking in a mall or girls' hair that used to be up here, you know, and stores like Chess King and Merry-Go-Round and that you would frequent at the mall after church on a Sunday.
Right.
All of those things bring like a really deep emotional response in me. I don't know why, but it's like I'm automatically transported right back there, hanging out with my friends, going to youth group, going to a place in Columbus, Ohio called the King's Place where you could see CCM bands come through, falling in love with White Heart for the first time when Tommy Sims was playing bass. And, just like all of those things that I took for granted. Yeah. And I'm like, sometimes I sit around and I even go, what was I doing on today in 1986? Yep. On this date, what was I doing on February, whatever it is? And because it was a magical time. It was. We didn't realize it, but it was.
Yeah. It's everything you said, plus to me, optimism. Yeah. I feel like there was a sense back then that...
That's because we had Reagan.
I'm going to have to edit that one out for half of our listeners.
No kidding.
So I took my daughter in 2022, I think it was, to see the new Top Gun movie. All the way home. And she was 19 at the time. She just chewed my ear off. Dad, you grew up in the best decade. Mm-hmm. You had the best music, the best movies, and this sense of optimism. Like life was just going to be great. Yeah. The American dream. It was all part of that decade. I was telling Bill Cuomo, we interviewed him a couple weeks ago. He wrote, he had a hand in Betty Davis Eyes and Oh Sherry, Steve Perry, and Here I Go Again on My Own, Whitesnake.
Talk about a great synth intro, both of those
Seriously,
songs.
He got known for that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I was telling him, I have this memory of I had these cousins who were twins and in Allentown, Pennsylvania. They lived on the side of this mountain. I can see that scene in my head as if it was yesterday, pulling out that vinyl, putting it on their record player and listening to Oh Sherry. And here I am 40 years later. I know. Sitting here talking to Bill, and we kept coming back to that one word, optimism. It just felt back then like, and I spent countless summers at my cousin's house. They had a pool. So I'd be laying on this raft in a 80s boombox playing 80s pop radio all day long. I know. And you just had, like you said, didn't have a care in the world. You felt like life was always going to be great. And,
And also, you have to say this about the 80s. It was okay to be unabashedly patriotic. I mean, there was this feeling that, absolutely, very proud to be an American. Right. And to quote Lee Greenwood. Right. But that song embodies how we all felt back then, right? Right. And so I feel like we've gotten so far away from where that time was
Yeah.
that it just I love to relive my memories from that. Some ways I'm still tied to those moments so deeply, you know, because they
it's powerful.
They were shaped the rest of my adult life.
Sure.
You know, they did. So.
Yeah, and I suppose it's possible that it's resonant for us now because we're that age, but I just don't think, Bill and I were talking about this, music today, I'm going to sound like the old guy griping on his front porch, Pawpaw.
Yeah.
But I just don't think that we're going to be 30 years from now looking back on music from now with that same sense. Because for one, pop music is, the bar to entry is here now. Hans Zimmer talks about this. Any kid with an iPad can create a record now in his bedroom. So this is back then, the bar to entry was much higher. You had to be talented. You had to be writing great songs.
You had to actually play.
You had to play. And all things considered, you know, it was all wrapped up in these. It was just a magical time because technology was coinciding with all that. You had all this, you know, drum machines and synthesizers. It just was a formula for stuff that I don't think we're ever going to see again.
I don't think so either. And my 12-year-old son is eating alive with music. He's singing, he's playing piano, and it's wonderful to watch his journey from the sideline because it mirrors so much the way I started to play and learn. And you see the light switch goes off when he like figures something out on the piano. He's got his iPad up and he's trying to learn how to play Bruno Mars, you know.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's coming together for him. But you know what he listens to? He listens to Kenny Loggins. He listens to Journey. Yeah. He listens to Chicago. Yeah. Like, this is the music that he's consumed by. He also listens to modern country. Yeah. He loves Cody Johnson. Yeah. You know, and Morgan Wallen and things like that. But he's drawn to real music with real musicality. Yeah. That's what he loves.
Parenting win.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
That's just good.
I do what I can.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing it right. I really do think that's what it all comes down to. I mean, it's you know, songs, timeless songs, which are vehicles to so many other good aspects of life. I mean, we all talk about this, you know, these songs were the soundtrack of a generation.
There's no doubt about it.
And so, yeah, it's...
And the thing that we miss now so much is you can tell songs are written in a writing room now with the same 4-bar loop over and over again. We missed like taking chances and modding and going somewhere else in bridges and all of the things that made the things that we love so important to us. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Or what is missing from today's modern music. You know? It's starting to come back a little. Yeah. I follow Rick Beato. I love his stuff. Yeah. And I love to listen to his take on the top 20 current songs. Right. And there's some of that. Bruno Mars, to his credit, is starting to write like we did, like all of us did back years ago, with real melodies and real sense of like chord changes and progression.
It's craftsmanship.
It is.
I was just, you know, since I was working on Foreigner Tune, I Want to Know What Love Is, I was reading the backstory of that. They slaved over that song for months. Yeah. Wanting to get it right. And when I, you know, now that I've kind of dug into that one, I'm hearing that. Like there's really intentional choices made all the way through that song that, you know, the average layperson isn't going to understand. But anybody who's musical is going to, you know, when you're really digging into it, like, wait a second. There's things sprinkled all throughout that. And so much of that decade was like that. Everything was very intentional. People put a lot of thought into, you know, like you said, chord changes. I mean, Genesis, good Lord. Tony Banks, the stuff that he came up with. And Smitty. I mean, those guys were animals when it came to crafting songs.
I always thought Cross of Gold was so close to Genesis.
It's that, absolutely. You could lay that song on top of Turn It On Again. Yeah, I mean, it's the same key, same tempo. They start with that thing.
So great.
But hey, man,
is that the song? I Want to Know What Love Is, where you're sitting down and you found that patch, but you didn't have the keyboard for it, but you found it on another. I watched that late at night one time. Yeah, I do a lot of deep dives when I can't sleep.
Oh, same here. Yeah, especially on a bus.
No kidding.
Okay, if you could work with any artist that you haven't been able to work with yet, whether it's 80s or contemporary, who would that be? Dream collab.
Yeah, I've had a chance to work with so many great people. I mean, that's a really good question. Smitty. I've never worked with him.
Really?
We've never written a song together. Never got to play with him. I would love to sit in a room and write a song with him.
Yeah. So it's funny enough. I think the first time you and I met, I was putting together that 35th anniversary show of his, which had like 60, killer guest artists. You guys came and did, I think it was his song "Pray for Me."
Yeah.
You did a killer vocal arrangement.
Thanks, man.
And
I sang that song at my high school graduation.
Did you?
So it was a really neat full circle moment for me.
Yeah, that's fun.
To sit on the stage with him on the platform while we were doing that.
That was a fun night. A lot of pressure because he wasn't supposed to, he knew about it, but he wasn't supposed to know any of the stuff. So I had to build that whole show from scratch.
Wow.
Which was a blast for me.
We did a fantastic job.
Thank you. It means a lot.
It was great.
It was a chance to really, I put together this big picture medley, and the original band. I hate it though that the band couldn't, let them come and take over our instruments and really do it.
They were pissed.
I think they were.
I know they were.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Doesn't surprise me. Well,
I mean, they were.
I fought for it.
I'm the band standing up there, but we can't play the tunes.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense. I'm like, why?
You can edit that part out. But
hey, man,
I talked to David and Chris afterward, and they were like,
Harris.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I probably need to tell them I fought hard for them. Like, guys, they were just worried about we got to keep it going.
Oh, I get it. I totally understand.
Well,
I totally
15-year-old me wanted to let them do it. Here I am,
David
and
Huff
it was
on drums.
It was so awkward because they're just standing there when we're playing the song, and that's anyway.
I think Rodriguez was there too.
All of them were.
Yeah,
the whole original band was there.
Heimerman.
Yeah.
Wayne. Who was it?
Wayne Kirkpatrick, Mark Heimerman, Chris Harris, Rodriguez, and David Huff. Yeah. That was fun, but awkward. Okay, round in the bend. Who are you listening today? What really inspires you today?
You're going to laugh at me and I'm going to sound so old. I spend so much time in the studio and I still do session work playing bass whenever I'm not on the road. So my day is filled with music.
Yeah.
I listen to the Billy Graham channel when I'm driving.
Okay.
I listen to, what else do I listen to? The NFL Network when it's football season.
Okay. Yep.
So most of my radio in my car is talk radio.
Yeah.
But through my son, I obviously stay in touch with, I love Morgan Wallen, Cody Johnson. I mean, I live in country music here at Red Street. And I also love Christian music too. I mean, I'm producing Consumed by Fire's new record right now. So I really, really love that world. I've said this from day one. I started with a Christian label because I believe that music has a message that will never be matched by any genre. And the world is in such a desperate place that people are dying for the message of hope.
Absolutely.
And that music can feed your soul in ways that other music can't.
Yeah.
So, I love Zach Williams. And
he is fantastic.
He's fantastic. Brandon Lake is on our new duets record. And
is that right?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's, if I'm being honest, I don't know if I've got a chip on my shoulder or what, but I think because I grew up on so much of this crafted music, like Smitty and whatever, I struggle with, my wife has modern worship on all the time in her office. And so I kind of always hear it in the background. I would say it used to be 80 to 90% of it. I'm just rolling my eyes. Like, it's that same chords. It all sounds like it was written for CCLI. But finally, people are writing some really good stuff.
They are, and I could not agree with you more. I get on my soapbox because what I fell in love with about Christian music doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah.
We went through this wonderful time where we had pop music alternatives like Smitty and Whiteheart and Petra and wonderful bands that were bringing top quality music to
the music was just as important as the message.
Unbelievable. To me, and then they were songs. They weren't. They were songs that connected people to people.
Yeah.
They weren't also vertical all the time.
Right.
Praise and worship music has its place.
Sure.
But what I loved about Christian music was they were singing about real life issues that people could identify with.
Right.
And at the center of it was their faith and what kept them rooted.
Right.
And I loved, you would never hear a Rocket Town on Christian radio nowadays.
Right.
And to me, that's what I fell in love with. So I wanted to get into the Christian music business to try to reshape a little bit of that, because if you'll talk to radio guys behind the scenes, they feel the same way.
Is that right?
Problem is, their audiences are dictating what they're going to play.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, man, I hope you can keep doing that, because I think there is a place for that, and that might get me interested again. But all that to say, when I heard you say Zach Williams, I couldn't tell you what the name of the song is. I just heard it maybe 2 weeks ago. I was kind of looking for something along those lines, and I was stunned. Like, it's a fantastic song, very different musically. Of course, I love his voice, but all that to say, I'm starting to hear some stuff like, wow, that they put some time into writing that song. So that's encouraging to me.
I think if we'll hang in there a little while longer, I think we'll see it start to shift even more, man.
Well, and it's helpful that there are guys like you who grew up on what we grew up on, that you can kind of steer that a bit and say, look, let's write some songs. I think God's okay with us writing songs about life.
We are.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about.
There is. And I think the more you kind of shed the skin of, we have to appear to be a certain way and sing certain things in order for us to succeed. Yeah. I think some of that is being stripped away. Yeah. And people are appreciating more and more the people that are being brave and bold enough to deal with and sing about real life issues. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So we're calling Arcade Orchestra the Ultimate 80s Experience. It's going to be an incredible show that reimagines the best of the 80s in a really epic and honoring way. But there are two main things that really motivate me with this, and we've kind of touched on this. First, we're ultimately telling people's stories, not just the artists who wrote these timeless songs, but and you'll relate to this. We're telling the audience's stories. Every person that comes to a show, whether it's Rascal Flatts or Arcade Orchestra, they're going to local folks weigh in. They're going to.
They agree.
They do agree. This girl on the front row, she's going to bring her story to the table. When she hears, if she's 50 years old, she's going to hear us do I Want to Know What Love Is, or With or Without You, or whatever the song is. You get to see people's reactions from stage, and you see that this is resonating with somebody because these are all shared stories. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a big deal. And I know that you've had experiences like that. You had you guys had a song called I'm Moving On.
Yeah.
Can you briefly tell that story? Something about a truck driver?
Oh, yeah. Well, we were at a radio station just doing a typical interview, and our song, which wasn't intended to be a single, I'm Moving On, Jerry House here, who used to do the morning show for years on WSIX, his wife, he laughs about it. His wife said, you got to play this song tomorrow morning or you're going to sleep on the couch. So he played I'm Moving On, and the phones lit up, and it just took on this life of its own. And wonderful lyric. Philip White and D. Vincent Williams wrote the song, and it's just it's one of the best lyrics I've heard in a long, long time. But we were at a radio station, and they got a phone call in. We were taking some calls live, and this guy said, I'm a truck driver, and I've really gotten to the point in my life where I didn't know if I wanted to go on, and I was contemplating suicide. He said, and I'm sitting here listening to your show, and the song I'm Moving On came on, and I had to pull off to the side of the road and call you, and I've been weeping. And
so this was real time?
This is real time.
Oh, wow.
And we're all just sitting there listening to this, like, just stunned, you know? And he's like, I just want to thank you guys because I think this song may have saved my life.
Wow.
And, you never know how many stories about that you'll never hear about.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah.
So it's, for me, what's been special about being in the Flats is Gary and Jodan also are men of faith. Mm-hmm. And we've been able to, and we've been deliberate about trying to sneak the gospel in however we can, whether it's at a show or it's through a lyric like I'm Moving On or God Bless the Broken Road. Yeah. Because I believe that we've been given a platform that is very rare. Yeah. And we've all been blessed extremely, so much further than what we would ever imagine. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's been one of the largest contributing factors to that success, I feel like, is because we've always recognized that it all comes from God.
Yeah.
And we're trying to be good stewards of what he's given us.
Yeah.
And I feel like with that, a great responsibility to pass the gospel on any way that we can.
Yeah.
So when you hear a story like that, or you hear a story like, Broken Road,
Yeah.
two broken homes that
Yeah.
people find each other because of that song,
Yeah.
it makes you feel like you've done a bigger job than just putting another song out.
Yep. So that leads me to something that I wasn't going to talk about, but working on this set list for what we're doing, I've had people say, I mean, it's crazy the suggestions I get. Somebody one time said, well, what about having you need Super Freak in there by Rick James? And I'm like, so wait a second. We've got songs like I Want to Know What Love Is and Kyrie and Living Years and In Your Eyes. Incredibly well-crafted songs, and you want to put Super Freak in there.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Rick James hasn't gotten a call from a truck driver saying, that song saved my life. Not that they all have to be these incredibly deep, borderline theological message. It's not that, but it's just, to me, there are so many songs to choose from that are rich lyrically, musically.
So you're not doing Darling Nikki?
Well, it was in contention with Pour Some Sugar on Me. It's which again, it's a fun song, but there's just so many. I'm trying to not be highbrow about it, but there's just so much great stuff that was well crafted.
Well, and it sounds like you're trying to put things together that have continuity too, and not some outlier.
It would be such a detour, in the middle of all these really great songs. But all that to say, gosh. I think it's a Martin Luther quote. I wrestled for a while with, am I okay to leave an almost 30-year career with Smitty and the stuff we would do with Amy Grant to do something that's not faith-based? Well, that's a whole other topic. But, my pastor reminded me, what's the old quote? How does a Christian shoemaker best honor God? Not by putting little crosses on his not by putting little crosses on his shoes, but by making the best shoes.
Yeah.
Craftsmanship.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it's not to go too far down that rabbit hole, but to me, it's about there's so much room for reminding people of great music, great songs that are unifying. It's just an opportunity for 10,000 people to all be under the same roof, have a great time, remember that sense of optimism, and maybe be encouraged a bit. That you just have fun and.
I love that so much. I've got very, very strong convictions about how I feel about playing secular music. I grew up in a very strict, legalistic household. And even though my dad was a musician and played all kinds of stuff from rock to pop to, country, my mom was pretty strict, and I could listen to pop music, but like I said, it was very much screened.
Right.
Chicago was about as harmless as you could get. Thank God I loved them,
Right.
But they're just, I've always felt like if you've got a bigger platform to reach people that Christian artists may not have a chance to be in front of. I've had incredible conversations with people in rock music and very hard, almost bitter musicians in the entertainment world and actors too that feel like they're out of place or feel like God's never going to love them for what they've done or what their past is or whatever. And I'm not saying that it's me, but it's given me a chance to at least plant seeds of the gospel when those conversations come up.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I feel like anytime you get a chance to be in a different situation than you would normally be in, to have the gospel be exposed to people that are of different walks of life than people that go to church.
Right.
I mean, my God, we could do that for the rest of our lives.
Right.
I want to influence the people that feel like they're forgotten and they're not loved.
Absolutely. And I just think there's so much room for just being a good steward of whatever it is you've been given. And I've learned so much of this from watching Smitty. I mean, when he was in the middle of his pop heyday on MTV and VH1, he's got so many stories of rubbing shoulders with people that they're not about to darken the doors of a church anytime soon.
Yeah.
But just loving people where they are, treating people well, with integrity, doing business with integrity, that stuff alone speaks volumes.
It does.
And it opens the doors to other conversations. And not that we got to go through life preaching at anybody, because that rarely works these days.
Doesn't.
But just being the kind of person that makes people go, what's What's different about you?
It used to frustrate me so bad when Amy was catching grief for having songs on pop radio, and then Place in This World came, and everybody was giving Michael grief for being in,
Right.
And it's just like, guys, we should celebrate this.
Yeah.
This is one of the most incredible things to happen because they have a different audience now that they can reach. And
He's got so many stories. Just Place in This World was like the song you were just talking about. He had the same thing. A girl wrote him a letter saying, I pulled off to the side of the road to kill myself. And Place in This World came on. Now she's married, 5 kids, living an incredible life. What a legacy. I mean, and what a gift that you were given a song like that. You wrote a piece that has impacted somebody's life.
It's one of my favorites ever, man.
Yeah.
And what an anthem for kids at that time.
Right.
It felt like they didn't have any direction.
It was timeless. I mean, to this day, people still hear that song and go, wow, they're...
One of the greatest Dann Huff solos ever.
Oh, my gosh. Call that the Smitty solo.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome, man. So last question. Since I should probably stick to my day job, this is not what I do. I'm trying to figure all this out. What's a question that any decent interviewer should ask Jay DeMarcus that maybe I haven't asked?
You've done a really, really great job. I don't think that there's one thing I could criticize. You covered a lot of territory.
Other than my hair. My wife's going to give me grief about, my hair.
The only thing I would like to tell you is that if you want to learn more about my story, I did write a book. And
I was actually going to bring that up, so tell me about that.
It was a wonderful experience, probably more therapeutical for me than anything else. Dealing with a lot of things, and my folks got divorced twice growing up.
Is that right?
From each other.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting childhood. Both very loving parents. But my story takes a lot of twists and turns. It's called Shotgun Angels. It's on Amazon. And
I'm glad you brought. I was hoping you would bring that
stuff.
up.
And I own a record label now, which is where we are, Red Street Records. We have both a country and a Christian division. I'm very proud of the work we're doing here.
And speaking of which, I will put links to all that stuff, in YouTube. Cool. So I'm going to make sure people can get access to all that.
Awesome.
Yeah, there you have it. So, y'all, thanks for watching. Be sure to leave any comments, hit like and subscribe. Check out all the links to Jay's stuff.
Let me know how much you love me.
I mean, we're
looking forward to hearing from you.
That's ultimately what this is all about. Go see Rascal Flatts on the Life as a Highway tour while you can. You will not be disappointed. Stay tuned. Blah, blah, blah. All that usual stuff. Thank you.
Love you, brother.
Appreciate
Thank you so much,
too.
man.
All right. That's a wrap.
I love it.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got more incredible 80s artists in the pipeline, so please be sure to hit like and subscribe, leave a comment, and follow us on our socials at Arcade Orchestra. On our next episode, we're going to revisit the 80s with a master storyteller, my good friend Bill Cuomo, who left his mark with an insane list of legends like Kim Carnes, Steve Perry, Whitesnake, the Footloose soundtrack, and many more. So stay tuned, keep being rad, and see you next time on Legends and Legacies.